Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of 1111. Today, we end our week on perfectionism. And our guest today is someone who is pretty much perfect at what he does, at least in my eyes. And because we are now in Love Month, I decided to bring in someone who absolutely loves what they do and, quite frankly, is part of the best couple I've ever met. So, with no further ado, please join me in welcoming Bradley Miller. Yay! To start, please tell us who you are, where you live, and what you do for both work and fun.
Well, as she said, I am Bradley Miller. I live in Orange County in Irvine. Currently, I am working for State Farm.
And that's Irvine in Southern California, yes?
Yes, Southern California, yes, because there's an Irvine in Texas, so that's not.
For those who don't know what State Farm is, if they're out of the country, what can you tell us a little bit about State Farm?
State Farm is the largest auto and home insurance company in the country.
And I'm guessing that's the part that you do for work, not for fun.
It can be fun depending on who's calling and who you're talking to. Fun, there's a lot of things that we do. We are lucky enough to be pretty close to beach down here and also the mountains. It's a very, very short drive, so we can go kind of look around. There's a local apple farm that's great here. We also have a younger grandson that we get to go and see and spend time with. He's a great baseball player. We have a tournament actually coming up this weekend. And then, of course, there is our local theater that we get to be involved in, which is a great creative outlet. We can do regular plays and musical plays. Sometimes there's cabaret shows that we get to be involved in. Of course, every holiday season, I do have my Christmas caroling quartets that we go out and we perform for some of the local senior communities, a lot of the local malls, private parties. So that's a great way to get into the spirit at that point.
For the record, how many musical theater shows have you been in?
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, I started doing this when I was 14, and I am now not 14. Probably, you know what? I'm not even sure it's countable. It's over 200.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I didn't even think to ask this. How did you get into it in the first place?
I've been singing since I was very young. It was just something that I enjoyed, and music spoke to me. My mother was trained in opera, and she also sang, so it just kind of something I got into. So I was doing choirs, but when I got into high school, it was just auditions they were having for their production that year. And I thought, if it's music, I can do that. I was in the choir class, so they invited the people from choir to come and audition, and I got cast in that. And it was just something that spoke to me at that time of just this. My father said when I came off stage opening night, I told him this is what I'm going to be doing. So.
Wow. And what was the role?
The show itself was not very well known because it was only written in 1979 and I did this in 1980s. And it was a show called The Runaways, and it was just monologues and songs about kids on the run. And so I didn't really have a character per se. I just did my one little monologue thing. There was a lot of group numbers. That's when I learned actually that I could dance, which was kind of fun. It wasn't really a part. It was just basically, me if I were living on the street. So
Right. An ensemble kind of piece thing.
Yeah, it's a very ensemble, a lot of wonderful solos. And that's part of the wonderful thing about doing theater. It gives you a chance to do and be things that you wouldn't normally. What would it be like if I were living on the street? Or what would it be like if I were a band leader or, leading the Continental Congress?
What I first found you in was the Mikado. What was that role that you played?
His name was Nanky Poo. Interesting thing, too, because that's playing a character who's playing a different character. So you delve into that, too. And you try not to get multiple personalities. And then you get to go home to your normal life and to the people who you love. And so it's a nice outlet.
How do you juggle being in a show with a full-time job? Because there's a lot of rehearsal involved, I'm sure.
My boss is very supportive of what I do, and especially the caroling, which requires me to be gone during the day a lot of the times in the holidays. But mostly the rehearsals that you get are in the evenings, so you can do it after your workday, and a lot of them are done during the weekend days. So you put that together and you make it work for you.
You've been in some professional productions mounted by heavy-hitting organizations. How does that differ from working in community theater?
The only real difference from what they call professional theater versus community is the community aspect is exactly that. You're working with a whole group of usually volunteers And you have to do a lot of things sometimes beyond just the performing. The community would sometimes ask you to come and help building sets. You can do painting. As a director, which I have been, there's a lot more aspects to it in the community service because a lot of the times they don't have people to help with costuming and people to help design lighting and stuff. A lot of them do now, some of them don't, and you kind of have to shift the performance aspect with designing what lights, what you want to have, and designing a set that you want to put together. In a professional aspect, the director and the producer do their job and they hire the local workers. I've worked in places where there's 4 or 5 people backstage to help the actors with costumes or whatever they have to carry on stage. Those are called props or properties. And so a lot of the pressure as an acting standpoint, you just have to get there and do your part of the job. A lot of it is taken over. And they both have their advantages. In the community aspect, you get to work a lot with other people. As a director, get a lot of the other creative things going. It's like, well, what would I want here? What would I want there? And in the professional aspect, you can just worry about your part and how you want to portray that. And when you come to the theater, there's a whole big set put together for you, and off you go.
And the professional productions, are those part of a union, out of curiosity?
Not always. No, some have been. There's companies called equity waiver houses and things like that. And there's some theaters that you have to be part of a union to get their union scale of payment. But there's some out there that will do some union work and some non-union work depending on how they've registered with their business.
With your experience, what's it like working with newbies or those who aren't what might be considered quote unquote Broadway material?
I like working with new performers. People are people, depending on whether they're new or not. I've worked with a lot of wonderful new people. I've worked with a lot of people who are hard to work with just because they're not used to it, and you have to really kind of pull with them and work on getting them to drop their shell sometimes. I worked with a lot of professional people. You've got prima donnas who don't think they have to do their painting or do their building. I would rather work with someone who is not necessarily the best, but has a great attitude and a passion for what they do, than work with someone who is polished and always on there, but doesn't really consider anybody else part of what they're doing. Theater is a very, very collective profession. I've worked with people where there's been a mistake on stage and they don't know what to do because they're only concerned about what they're doing. This is not cut, let's take that again and go again. Sometimes the people who are very fresh and new end up being the best part of what you're doing. When we did Annie, you have millions of kids and no adults who come down and do these shows. And I think we had 2 of our kids who managed to corral their parents or at least their father in. Never stepped foot on stage, never thought of being on stage. And they ended up being some of the best things that happened with just the little things that we gave them. They were so invested in being with their child and helping out and seeing how the process worked. That was amazing. We had a lady in South Pacific who has been a friend of ours for years and never done a show, but she said, I'd really like to do this just to say I've had the experience. She became the, what do you call it? Not the den mother, but she took care of everybody. Everybody swarmed around her. She was like the positive force because she just was so into everything. It was just fun to see that kind of stuff work out. And then a gentleman that, again, same thing. We needed more men in the show. We had their 2 young daughters and the mom, and the father did shows in high school, but hadn't really thought about it. Again, came in, added so much to that. That was maybe 20, 25 years ago. And he has now done student films. He's done semi-professional films. He is now an author and a playwright. So you never know where they're going to come from.
And what you might spark in them, that's pretty
Yeah.
inspiring.
Right. And I enjoy working with the young people too, because you can kind of mentor things that they hadn't thought about and all that, and they want to be a performer, but they really don't know how to go about it.
Going to put you on the spot here. Do you have a favorite role you've played? I've got a few favorites I've seen you in. I'd love to hear it from your end.
It's surprising when you say that, because I always thought, oh, this would be my dream role, and I got to do that role. And then, but before that, I did another one. I'm like, you know what? I could do this one forever. And that was Tata in Ragtime.
Oh, I was so wrong.
No, because you're thinking Tevye, which is a great role.
I was actually thinking John Adams.
John Adams, which is, again, that you sometimes you can't really place them. They're all like neck and neck depending on where you are. I didn't think that role would speak to me as much as it did. John Adams is a great role as well, and I've enjoyed performing that.
And for those who don't know, that's from the show 1776, and Tevye is from?
Fiddler on the Roof.
Another one I loved you in is Man of La Mancha. What do you love most about performing, be it singing, acting, dancing, or even rehearsing?
Gosh, everything you put in there. The performance itself, once you're there and you get the reaction from the audience, because rehearsing can be fun, but it does get tedious towards the end where it's just like you're doing the thing again and doing the thing again and then the first audience comes in and they feed that energy to you and it becomes a whole new experience because they've never seen it before. So now the things that you've been laughing about and everything, it's like, okay, well, I know it's coming up now. Then the audience kicks in. They're really getting a kick out of this. The energy becomes almost palpable.
I know I cheer from the crowd. What has been the benefit for you and your family of working specifically in community theater versus dealing with, let's say, the New York theater scene or the touring scene or just that whole world?
If you're going to pursue this, you do need to make your choices. I've had opportunities to do touring, but it requires 9, 10 months on the road, not with your family. I'm at a point now where I could do it, but I still have Trish with me, and it's difficult to be doing that. The community theater set, and sometimes there's some local professional theaters that you can work here with and get that experience. With a community set, yeah, you can come home every night, be with the people you care about. To me, I think if you're going to be doing touring, at least in my aspect, I would need to just be living by myself. But I know a gentleman who does cruise ships and he plays piano and he's away from his family for months at a time. He'll come home probably from a trip and be at home for a day or two, but then he's back out. That's his money. People who are touring, that is their income. When you have a different form of income, then you make your choices on that. So, and I know a lot of people who could be in professional stage, but just like me, you make that choice of where you want to do and what you want to do with your life. And it doesn't mean that the passion is there any less when what you're doing it. Whether you're going to be on stage or whether you're going to be a painter or whether you're going to be an author or a gardener or whatever it is, if it speaks to you and you have a passion for it, that's where your payment comes from.
That's a fantastic way of saying it. What's coming up next for you?
What is coming up next for me? Let me see. What can I talk about? Oh, yes. I'm doing a shortened cabaret style Phantom of the Opera. It is what they call a musicality. And the ladies and gentlemen get to come and sit and have their high tea. And then myself and 3 other performers will be doing a condensed version of Phantom of the Opera. So they get the music and they get their wonderful experience and food, and it's fun for me to do that because it's right up close. You get right next to people and they get to see all your bad grooming habits and everything.
I call that theater in the midst because you're in the midst of everybody. We'll be doing a few more of those with you. I'm really looking forward to Phantom. It's part of our Phantom Fantasy fundraising experience. Something I've really enjoyed watching you perform in is your caroling troupe. I've never seen carolers like this. The Caroling Connection, run by Lisa Rios and Tom. And what's Tom's last name?
Popovsky?
I can never say that. Thank you. Run by Lisa and Tom. It's just fantastic because it's an actual show. There's choreography, there are jokes. It's just so well written and so well performed and pulls on every heartstring. And whenever we've had you perform, it's just been rave reviews and immediately people asking me for your card. Where can I get a hold of them? We need them. And of course, you're already booked by then. So I am advocating, without checking with the powers that be, without checking with the owners of the company, that if you're considering a Christmas in July party, consider getting a hold of the Caroling Connection in Southern California. I'll make sure that we have links available in the description box because they're just terrific. We had you guys for, what was the thing that we did? Was it a Tim Burton type of Halloween thing?
Yeah, we kind of did the Nightmare Before Christmas kind of a deal.
Yes, Scarolers. You guys were in your Victorian garb, but with the sunken cheeks and the hollow eyes and the cobwebs and all that. And
kind of how we look at the end of the Christmas season.
And another thing that you've got to look forward to is someone near and dear to you, if I understand correctly, is composing the music, writing the libretto, and pretty much creating a musical from The Prince and the Pauper. Can you tell us a little bit about that? We'll hear more about it next week, but just a teaser.
She's been working on this for quite some time. And before we even met, she had a lot of the songs in her head and a lot of the things, but life sometimes get in the way of that, and you've got other things to work with. But the last few years we found it. She reignited that spark in her, and she was lucky enough to find some time where she actually finished the entire script. She's got the lyrics set out. She's got basic tunes in her head, and we're looking forward pretty soon to hopefully having a kind of a workshop slash kind of a reader's theater type of a thing to see if what's on paper is going to work on stage, or does there things need to be tweaked. And that's what happens in theater too, when you have preview shows and things like that, and they find out on stage, this is not what we envisioned, this part doesn't work, we have to kind of go in and tweak that and tweak this, and it's all part of the process.
So you're getting in on the process from the very inception. You're not just being plugged into a role that you audition for. You're getting to see every single aspect, from putting pen to paper to getting the arrangement done. That's quite an undertaking.
It is. And I haven't had that experience before, but that to have something that you work like that and then all of a sudden there it is, your vision is brought forth.
Originally, when we first talked about you being on the show, we'd hoped that you would have either an online or in-person course available. But fortunately, Prince and the Pauper got in the way, which is fantastic. But down the line, we hope that you will be able to offer new performers some advice, not even advice, but some actual training, some of the tricks of how you set yourself on stage, how you pull a punch, how you take a fall.
It's funny, you do have to kind of get used to talking to people without actually looking at them sometimes. And the audience just has to know that that's who you're talking to. A lot of times when you're on stage, you kind of like, it feels like you're talking to yourself. You start a conversation, then you walk forward a little bit so the audience can see you. And they know you're talking, but they're like not next to you, they're kind of behind you. So you're like talking to air. It's an interesting concept. And there's different types of stages too that you have to determine. You can be on a full stage where you're just looking out, or you can be on a stage where there's audience all around you and you have to kind of check on where you're going to be and presenting yourself to the most audience members that you can.
As we ease into next week's theme, which celebrates love, what advice can you give to someone who loves an activity the way you love theater, but this person does not make their living at that activity? What would you say to them?
Whether you're getting paid for it or not, you have to approach it within yourself with whatever it is, with passion, with love, with respect. Regardless, there's a lot of people who in my family who say, well, why do you do that? I don't understand why you do that. How can you do that? Blah, 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 blah. A lot of people have looked down on the theatricals because, again, it didn't make money. So why would you bother doing that? And my answer is, well, why do you surf? You do it because it ignites something that your job is not going to. Again, the old adage, money doesn't buy happiness. And it can get you a lot of things that'll get you that creature comfort. But if there's nothing that you have that sparks you, it's not going to be fulfilling. So whatever you find to do, whatever speaks to you, and it can be different. I'm amazed a lot of times when I see people who, like, that person wanted to go out into the desert and dig in the dirt. And that's what spoke to them. That's what fascinated them. People who get into astronomy, there's people who get into art, gardening, music, words. My grandson is into space and he's into the space program and science and robotics, way beyond what I can freaking think of. Now, if you're lucky enough to find something that sparks your passion, that you can make money at, great. But the money doesn't necessarily gain you more internally and spiritually. It's a nice perk. And if you're lucky enough to find the people who will pay you for what you love to do, that's cherry on the cake there. But even still, find anything that you do that sparks your interest, just so that when you come home from the end of your day, there's a way to release the stress of your day and find something that's just for you.
Ooh, I love that. Just for you. What's it like working with your wife, both as a fellow performer and with her as a director?
Well, as a fellow performer, it's amazing. I mean, you get to, just play around, and we've been fortunate enough to be able to perform together. I've never met anyone more natural on stage than she is, so I enjoy that. And unfortunately, the timing for her doesn't always match up. She's directed me, I've directed her and stuff, and a lot of that, sometimes you put aside your couple persona. If you like each other amazingly as we do, then you get through it. But there's a lot of times when I know I have had to, in my mind, like I'm doing something and I think it's really good. And she's like, that's not working. We have to go back. Let's take a look at this. And I have to drop that ego in me and trust the pair of eyes that's been hired to look at it because I'm looking at me and seeing what I'm doing. She's looking at the whole picture. And again, I trust her completely. And that took a little while to not fight against it. And it's fun because she likes to come on stage sometimes during rehearsals and sit in the middle of the stage or sit next to somebody who's on stage to kind of see the experience from there. Is this going to work for an actor or performer who's sitting here? Are they going to be able to tell what's going on or react to where it's supposed to be and all of that? And I'm at the point now where if she's going to be directing, just drop the machismo and just let her do her work.
Any last thoughts for those just starting out in their musical theater career?
You have to develop a little bit of a skin. Actors and performers, as a general rule, are a little self-conscious because they've chosen a profession where they need acceptance. And they have put themselves in a position where every 3 months they have to apply for a new job. And they're not necessarily going to get them all. If you're starting out, audition for anything that you can, whether you get it or not. The experience of getting in front of people and putting yourself out there in one of the most vulnerable positions you could possibly be in. The greatest fear in the world is speaking in front of people. The second greatest fear is death. So if you're at a funeral, most people would rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. It's an interesting concept, but you have to develop a skin that says, hey, you didn't get this part. Could be you're just not what they're looking for. And anytime that you can, if you don't get a part, contact the director if you're able to and say, I want to grow as a performer. What was it that you were looking for? What did I not bring to you? And use every audition and every performance that you do as a learning experience. Find out what works. I have seen things that I have done 25 years ago, and I'm like, who the hell hired me? That was what you got. I've done John Adams 3 times. The first time, 10 years too young for the part. The second time, right there. The third time, 10 years older than the character. And I can see from when I first started and the experience level on stage and also the experience level of someone who's 10 years younger than the character is playing, that experience level isn't there. The maturity isn't there. And so each one grows as you move forward. So audition for everything that you can and be prepared to not necessarily get everything you want. It took me a long time to get leading roles. But again, keep your passion alive and learn from the people around you.
That is hugely inspiring. And it's hard for me to believe that you didn't get leading roles right off the bat, but I will take your word for it.
Director from the high school that put me in the show, I'm like, I was not the best student of his. I took his theater classes. I was a 14-year-old little whiny kid. Bless you for trusting me enough to not only put me on stage in a place where I'd have to speak on my own, but I actually closed the show. The song that I sang closed that show. And I'm like, well, I don't know what you saw something I didn't, but bless you.
Yeah, well, I bless him as well. Thank you so much, Brad. I've been really looking forward to this. This has been such a treat. And I will put in the description box some links where people can find you online.
Okay.
And if anybody wants to participate in anything you're doing or audition or be an investor even, I know that our little arts nonprofit is looking forward to investing in Princeton and the Pauper. Thank you again. And because you're one of the few people who will know how we close out the show, I will say to everyone, Chariste som.
Hello, Chariste Place.
Wonderful. Tuta, everyone.